All right, guys. Did you enjoy the exercise? Who here feels that they sound a little bit more hypnotic now? Anyone? Thinking about the person you just did the exercise with, do they not sound like a genuine, qualified, good hypnotist, just in terms of the language that's coming out? We haven't even done any formal hypnosis yet, as far as language goes. But already you're flowing more smoothly, right? You should also find that this stuff is coming spontaneously. It's just the ideas are flowing by themselves. Is that fair enough to say? It's actually easier to do it this way than that random pointing exercise we did earlier on, right? Oh, yeah. And it should also be easier to do this than try and memorize a script or even read a script. Because I don't know if you know this, but reading a script, it's something that, takes a lot of training. Hollywood actors spend years developing the skill of memorizing and reading scripts. What makes us think as hypnotherapists, we can just do that and go like, all right, and now you're relaxing, 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 all the way now. I mean, isn't that how we read, unless we've prepared ourselves for something or we know the script already? I don't like scripts. And the reason I don't like scripts is partly because it becomes like really cheesy, play school acting, and partly because it limits your scope. In conversational hypnosis, it is impossible with a script. It is downright impossible because there's no conversation, right? You can give someone a lecture, give them a hypnotic lecture, we'll come on to those things, and you can memorize that lecture. That'll work. But a conversation is impossible to run hypnotically because it requires interaction, and that's going to destroy your script like that. I'd much rather have you understand the principles involved and do it anytime, any place, anywhere, and fit it right into the conversation. Isn't that a much more sensible way of approaching things? So do you get a sense of you understand the language now? There's a lot of richness here. There's a lot of depth and exploration. And I strongly recommend that you do explore this. This exercise on itself is the core of what we'll be doing here in terms of this style of conversational hypnosis. There's another style that we'll talk about in the advanced section. Essentially, we have our guiding theme. That's the power word. That's just what pulls everything together. It's the cement that holds the building together. Make sense? Around that cement, we're going to fill that in with the trance themes. The trance themes are the purpose of your communication. In this case, it's something simple as relaxing, feeling good, focusing, and so on. But it could be to improve learning. It could be to motivate someone towards something, right? It could be to excite someone about a vision of the future. It could be anything. For the moment, though, we're focusing on relaxation and comfort because we're still finding our feet when it comes to the whole trance thing. Make sense? We flesh the very same things out with the sort of reverse side, the mirror image of that, which is the reference similes, right? The similes that breathe life into your hypnotic themes. So you can sit there and it'll work. This is the old school hypnosis? Relax, relax, relax. Sleepy, sleepy eyes. Heavy, sleepy, droopy. It works, right? I've done it and it works and it works pretty well. It's very boring, but it works. And it has its place. I strongly recommend that if you haven't done so already, you go and hypnotize at least one person just through sheer force of repetition, right? It'll teach you a lot of very valuable lessons. But this makes it much more rich, and this allows you to start being more conversational. It begins to get more conversational, doesn't it? Then you use things like your language softeners, your language modifiers, and that kind of creates a little bit more of more acceptability in terms of what you're doing, right? Then you make sure you include your hot words. Your hot words create another context which fills the whole thing up, and now every part of your communication is going in one direction, which is whatever your hypnotic outcome happens to be. Does that make sense? This is going to get the heart of the kind of conversation hypnosis we'll be focusing on over the next 5 days. There's another kind that will be in the advanced program, then the second half, which is different, but this is the heart of it, and this is what's going to make it conversational and very, very powerful. Go ahead. So we've got the power words, which runs through the center, right? The power words, because, and, which means, and so on, right? Then you have your trance themes, which give those power words purpose. I mean, you don't just glue to itself for the hell of it. Maybe you do, right? The point of glue is to put things together. That's what the trance themes are about, right? The reference similes are just a way of enhancing the trance themes to bring them to life more, to make them more potent. Then we have the language modifiers. In this case, we just focus on language softness to make it more acceptable, to soften the impact of the message. And finally, we'll complete the picture by adding more emotion, by focusing more on the hot words that are more emotive, that are responded to more powerfully at the unconscious level, because it just has more reference experiences. Make sense? Yes. So those are the key maneuvers I want you guys to really understand. And if you learn nothing else in the next 10 days, this on its own will make you more influential, more persuasive, more charismatic than really most things that you'll come across out there. This on its own. It is really worth spending the time and the effort to make this an absolute natural way of communicating for you. For me, it's harder to turn it off than to turn it on. It just feels natural to speak this way now. Does that make sense to you guys? Once you've got this, then we can start layering more complex structures around that. That's what tomorrow will be around, or will be about, so that you can make these things more powerful, just have more impact with them still, and maneuver things in different directions. In other words, the thing that's missing here is a process. That's what tomorrow is going to be more about. For the moment, you get this idea, right? And it's straightforward, and with practice, you'll get better at it. Go ahead.
I often found myself during delivering that I was zoning out.
So the question here is, he found himself zoning as the hypnotist. Speaking this way would zone him out as well. You're just ahead of the crowd.
The first question was...
Just, you want to come up, seeing as there's a little bit longer, so then everyone can share in the bountiness of your experience.
Yeah, well, the first question was, is that less likely to happen with something that's not so focused on relaxation, calm, comfort, and all those sorts of things?
So the answer to your first question is really depends on not the focus of the trance themes is not the important element. The important element is your purpose. In other words, what are you trying to achieve? If your purpose is you need someone to be more in this sort of trance, then it'll happen more. If you need someone to be more like, yeah, I'm going to go for it, then it'll happen less. In other words, it's called going first. We'll be going into that actually after the break. And you're putting yourself in the position first, psychologically, physically, emotionally, and so on, that you need the other person to be in, so it's easier for them to follow in.
And that's much more important than the actual language patterns that you're using?
Absolutely.
Okay. Because that's what I found. Even after a sentence or two, I felt myself almost really zoning out, and then I could see him doing it, and then I kind of lost track of what I was saying, but we were both...
Later in the week, when we get to the irresistible induction, this will make a lot more sense.
Okay.
And there's a reason it's called the irresistible induction. Here's a hint. Because it's hard to resist. But what you're talking about lies at the heart of that, yes.
Okay. All right, great.
Great, thank you so much. All right, guys, let's have a quick break. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to ask a quick question.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes, please. Let's open this one up here.
You were mentioning before that with a hot word, for example, let's say you say friendly to someone who had been backstabbed.
Yes.
And they would counteract, like they would react negatively.
Not the would, they might. It depends on if they've associated with a friend, so now becomes a tainted concept and so on. But yes.
So the question is, if they have that sort of counteractive reaction, what's something as a hypnotist you can do to kind of counteract, like what they're going through?
That's an excellent question. So if basically you use the wrong word, you should notice that you've got a reaction like, right? You will get more into the how to spot reactions as we go through. This tends to tell you that whatever you did was not quite right. Then you have to cycle. Basically, the simple answer is you switch. You cycle through a different vocabulary. In other words, you start using different words. If you spotted the actual thing or phrase or word that you used that made them react so badly, then you just drop it from your vocabulary. You use other phrases, right? Guardians, assisting, people who assist. You might use metaphors or similes to do that. So you can still go down your original track. You just avoid pressing the hot button, right? Sometimes you want to press the hot button on purpose. It's a way of deflating. In other words, taking out the taint, the original sting. That's more when we talk about therapy and so on. There's ways of doing that as well. But ultimately, the simplest way of doing it is when you spot the phrase that's causing problems, stop using it and focus on different language that is being more emotive and so on. Does that make sense?
Yes. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. It was a good question, though. Go ahead.
In her question,
Yes.
another way to defuse the situation, you can add
Another way you might be able to do is just to add an adjective like trustworthy friend, and it can work great. And again, it's just something you have to experiment with. There is no hard answer to this, right? It's just a simple question of, you know what the problem is, you know what to avoid, which is that particular problem. Now you can go down, that's the irresistible suggestions route, where you start stacking other associations around the term to make it more acceptable. For example, you know, the happiness of a trustworthy friend. So now you have happiness and trustworthy fitted in, but if trust is still part of the issue, then that might still reinforce. And so you can go wrong with everything you do, but you're more likely to go right. What we're trying to emphasize here is this is about stacking the deck. This is not about absolute 100% surefire guarantees, because if you believe in those things, well, unfortunately, that's not how life works. Does that make sense? There'll be plenty of people who promise you this is the one thing that'll always work 100% of the time, guaranteed, and so on. But it doesn't really exist in the world. What you can get to is very close to that, and that's what we're doing right now.